On New Year's Eve, my parents shut down my proposal, saying you don't deserve to carry the family name, and that my sister should marry first. So I cut them off and moved on, until years later a hospital confession revealed why I was only kept alive. The champagne flute sat untouched on the dining table as I stood there with Julian's hand in mine, my heart hammering against my ribs. We'd planned this moment for weeks, choosing New Year's Eve at my parents' house because I foolishly believed family gatherings meant something. Julian squeezed my fingers, offering silent encouragement as I cleared my throat. "Mom, Dad, Ashley," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Julian and I have some news to share." My mother barely glanced up from arranging the cheese board. Dad kept scrolling through his phone. Only my younger sister bothered to look at me, though her expression held more curiosity than warmth. "We're engaged," I announced, unable to keep the smile from spreading across my face. "Julian proposed last week, and I said yes." The silence that followed felt like ice water down my spine. Mom's hands stilled over the crackers. Dad finally looked up, but instead of joy or even surprise, his face twisted into something closer to disgust. "Absolutely not," Mom said flatly. I blinked. "What?" "You heard me." She set down the knife with a sharp click against the marble counter. "This is completely inappropriate and, frankly, disrespectful." Julian's grip on my hand tightened. "Mrs. Winters, I don't understand. You don't deserve to carry the family name," Dad interrupted, his voice cold and measured. "Ashley should marry first. She's the one who's made us proud, who's lived up to our expectations." The words hit me like physical blows. I'd spent 28 years trying to earn their approval, watching them shower Ashley with praise for achievements I'd accomplished years before. When I graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown, they'd been too busy celebrating Ashley's acceptance to the same university. When I landed my dream job at a prestigious consulting firm, they'd thrown Ashley a party for making Dean's List. "This is ridiculous," I managed to say, though my voice shook. "Ashley doesn't even have a boyfriend." "That's beside the point." Mom crossed her arms. "There's an order to these things. She's our priority, and you need to respect that." Ashley, to her credit, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. She never did. My baby sister had perfected the art of silent complicity, accepting every advantage our parents gave her while pretending not to notice my exclusion. "I'm not asking for your permission," I said quietly. "I'm 28 years old. I just wanted to share this with you." "Then you've made a mistake." Dad stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "If you go through with this engagement, you're making a choice. Don't expect us to be part of your life." The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Julian, whose jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. Then I looked at my parents, at the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally but had spent my entire life making me feel like an obligation rather than a daughter. "Fine," I heard myself say. "If that's how you want it." I walked out of that house with Julian beside me, and I didn't look back. My phone buzzed constantly for the next few days with messages from my mother, each one more manipulative than the last. She called me selfish. She said I was tearing the family apart. She claimed I'd regret throwing away my relationship with them over some man. I blocked their numbers on January 3rd. The wedding happened 6 months later in a small vineyard in Virginia. Julian's family welcomed me with open arms, filling the absence my parents left behind. His mother helped me choose my dress. His father walked me down the aisle without being asked, tears streaming down his weathered face as he whispered, "You're the daughter I never had." I cried through most of the ceremony, but not from sadness. Life moved forward the way it does when you finally stop carrying dead weight. Julian and I bought a townhouse in Arlington. I made partner at my firm before I turned 30. We traveled to places I'd only dreamed about, no longer feeling guilty about spending money on myself instead of trying to win approval that would never come. The first year without them was strange. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call Mom about something mundane, only to remember she'd chosen to cut me off. Holidays felt empty at first, until Julian's family absorbed us into their traditions. His mother, Patricia, taught me how to make her grandmother's apple pie recipe. His father, Tom, would pull me aside during family gatherings to ask about my cases at work, genuinely interested in my opinions and insights. "You know," Patricia said to me one Thanksgiving, her hands deep in bread dough, When Julian first told us about you, he said you were the strongest person he'd ever met. I didn't understand what he meant until I saw how you handled your family situation. I paused in my potato peeling. I just walked away. That doesn't seem particularly strong. Walking away from toxicity takes more courage than people realize. Staying would have been easier in some ways. She shaped the dough into a loaf with practiced movements. My own mother was difficult. Not like yours, but enough that I had to set boundaries. She died angry at me for it, and I've never regretted my choice. Her words settled something in me, a validation I hadn't known I needed from someone who understood. Work became my sanctuary in those early months. I threw myself into cases with renewed focus, no longer distracted by the constant background noise of family drama. My colleagues noticed the change. Jennifer, who'd worked with me for 3 years, pulled me aside after a particularly successful client presentation. "Whatever you did over the holidays, keep doing it," she said with a grin. "You're on fire lately." "Just cleared out some dead weight," I told her. The promotion to senior consultant came 6 months after the wedding. My boss, Richard, called me into his office with a smile playing at his lips. "The partners have been watching you, Naomi. Your billable hours are up 20%, client satisfaction scores are exceptional, and you're mentoring junior associates better than people with twice your experience." He slid a folder across his desk. "We'd like to make you partner. Youngest in the firm's history." I stared at the offer letter, the salary figure that would have made my parents choke on their superiority. "When?" "Effective immediately. Your first act as partner will be leading the Morrison merger. $80 million deal." I accepted without hesitation, signing the papers right there. When I called Julian from the car, I could barely contain the shaking in my voice. "I made partner," I said when he answered. "Julian, I actually made partner." His whoop of joy was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "That's my girl. We're celebrating tonight. Anywhere you want to go." We ended up at the same Italian restaurant where he'd proposed, raising glasses of expensive wine to a future built entirely on our own terms. The waiter brought out a complimentary dessert with "Congratulations, partner Naomi" written in chocolate sauce, and I cried happy tears into Julian's shoulder. "Your parents are idiots," he whispered into my hair. "Complete idiots for not seeing what an incredible person you are." "Their loss," I managed to say. "Literally their loss." Ashley sent me a wedding invitation 2 years after mine. I looked at the embossed cardstock for a long time before throwing it away. She'd chosen our parents over standing up for what was right, and that decision had consequences. 4 years passed. 4 years of building a life that felt authentically mine, surrounded by people who actually valued me. The twins, Oliver and Andrew, were 2 years old now, filling our home with chaos and laughter. Julian and I had just started discussing whether we wanted a third child when my phone rang at 3 a.m. with an unknown number. The Morrison merger had turned into 3 more high-profile deals. I'd been featured in Washington Business Journal's 40 Under 40 list. Julian had started his own architectural firm, designing sustainable housing projects that were getting national attention. We'd bought a lake house in the Shenandoah Valley where we spent weekends hiking and talking about the family we wanted to build. 2 kids, Julian said one Saturday morning, coffee in hand as we sat on the dock watching the sunrise. "Maybe 3 of the first 2 don't drive us crazy. I want them to feel safe," I told him. "To never question whether they're loved or valued or wanted." He squeezed my hand. "They will. Because they'll have you as their mother." I'd also started therapy around this time. Dr. Sarah Mitchell specialized in family estrangement, and she helped me untangle decades of conditioning. In one particularly difficult session, she asked me to describe my earliest memory of feeling less than. "I was 7, I said slowly. Ashley was 5. We both wanted to take piano lessons. Mom said they could only afford to enroll one of us, and Ashley got to go because she'd shown more natural talent during the trial class. How did that make you feel?" "Confused, mostly. I'd played just as well as Ashley during the trial. The teacher even said so." I picked at the tissue in my hands. But Mom insisted Ashley was better suited for it. Looking back, I realized that was one of the first times I understood there were different rules for us. "And how did you cope with that realization?" "I tried harder. Got better grades, joined more clubs, achieved more things. I thought if I was just exceptional enough, they'd have to notice me. I laughed bitterly. Turns out, nothing was ever going to be enough because I wasn't the daughter they wanted. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward slightly. You spent your childhood trying to earn something that should have been freely given. That's not a failure on your part, Naomi. That's their failure as parents. Those sessions helped me understand that cutting them off wasn't cruel or vindictive. It was survival. It was choosing mental health over the toxic obligation of family ties that only caused pain. I also reconnected with extended family members I'd lost touch with over the years. My father's sister, Aunt Rebecca, reached out through LinkedIn after seeing my promotion announcement. I always wondered what happened to you, she wrote. Your mother stopped including me in family events years ago. I'd love to catch up if you're willing. We met for lunch at a cafe in Georgetown. Rebecca was in her 60s, elegant in a way my mother had always tried to achieve but never quite managed. She ordered soup and studied me with intelligent brown eyes. You look like your father did at your age, she said. Before he married Claudette and let her poison everything good in him. I nearly choked on my water. That's direct. I'm too old to waste time on pleasantries. Your mother was always manipulative, and your father was too weak to stand up to her. Rebecca buttered her bread with precise movements. They pushed me out when I questioned how they treated you versus Ashley. Said I was causing drama. When was this? You were about 12. I'd come for your birthday party and noticed they'd bought Ashley a new bike as an early present but gave you a gift card to a bookstore. When I asked why the disparity, your mother accused me of favoritism and uninvited me from future gatherings. Hearing this from someone who'd witnessed the dysfunction from outside made it more real somehow. Why reach out now? Because I saw what you accomplished and felt proud, even though I had nothing to do with it. Thought you might want to know that someone from that family sees you clearly. She smiled. Also, I have photo albums from when you were little. Pictures your mother probably destroyed. Thought you might want them. I met with Rebecca regularly after that. She filled in gaps about my father's family history, explaining patterns of dysfunction that stretched back generations. Apparently, my grandfather had been a cold, domineering man who'd taught my father that emotions were weakness and that family was about maintaining appearances rather than genuine connection. Your father never had a chance to be different, Rebecca said during one visit. That doesn't excuse what he did to you, but it explains it. He was recreating the only model of parenting he knew. Did you ever try to help him? To break the cycle? Many times. He'd listen, seem to understand, then go right back to following Claudette's lead. Eventually I realized I couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. She poured us both more tea. You breaking free from that pattern? That's revolutionary, Naomi. You ended a generational curse. Her words stayed with me for weeks. I wasn't just protecting myself by cutting off my parents. I was protecting future children from inheriting that same dysfunction. I was choosing to be the last link in a chain of emotional damage that had probably stretched back further than anyone could trace. Julian noticed the shift in me after those meetings with Rebecca. You seem lighter somehow, he observed one evening. I think I'm finally understanding that their treatment of me was never about me. It was about their own damage, their own limitations. I curled up next to him on the couch. Doesn't make it hurt less, but it makes it make sense. You ready to start thinking seriously about kids? I looked at him, at this man who'd chosen me completely and stuck by me through the hardest decisions of my life. Yeah. I think I am. We started trying that month. It took 8 months of negative tests and growing frustration before I finally saw those 2 pink lines. I cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes before showing Julian, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. We're really doing this, I whispered as he held me. We're really doing this, he confirmed, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The pregnancy was complicated. I developed gestational diabetes and had to be on bed rest for the last 2 months. Julian worked from home to take care of me, bringing me meals and reading architecture journals aloud when I was too exhausted to focus on my own work. What if I'm terrible at this? I asked him one night, my hand on my swollen belly. What if I repeat their mistakes? You won't. You know what not to do, and more importantly, you know what love is supposed to look like. He kissed my forehead. These kids are going to be so lucky to have you as their mom. When the ultrasound revealed twins, I laughed until I cried. Of course it was twins. Nothing in my life ever went the simple way. Labor was 36 hours of hell that Julian stayed through every minute of, holding my hand and reminding me to breathe when the contractions made me want to give up. When the doctor finally placed Oliver in my arms, followed minutes later by Andrew, I understood what people meant when they talked about instant, overwhelming love. "Hello, little ones," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Your mama's got you. I promise you'll always know you're wanted." Julian leaned over us, his own eyes wet. Our family, I agreed. The boys transformed our lives in ways I couldn't have imagined. Every milestone felt sacred because I made sure to be present for all of them. First smiles, first steps, first words. I documented everything, not for social media or to prove anything to anyone, but because these moments mattered. These boys mattered. I almost didn't answer. "Hello? Is this Naomi Winters?" A professional female voice, strained with fatigue. "This is Fairfax Hospital. Your father, Lawrence Winters, was brought in 2 hours ago. He's asking for you." My first instinct was to hang up. My second was to say they had the wrong number. But something in the nurse's voice made me pause. "What happened?" "Stroke. Massive. He's stable for now, but..." She trailed off in a way that spoke volumes. "He's insisting he needs to speak with you. Says it's urgent." Julian drove me to the hospital without question, his hand resting on my knee the entire way. I felt numb, disconnected from my body as we navigated the fluorescent-lit hallways to the ICU. Mom was there, looking smaller somehow. Ashley sat beside her, visibly pregnant. They both stared when I walked in, but neither spoke. "Room 412, a different nurse told me. But be warned, his speech is impaired. He's having trouble communicating." Dad looked ancient in that hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped rhythmically. One side of his face drooped, and when he saw me, something in his eyes shifted. "Naomi." The word came out garbled, distorted. He lifted his functional hand, gesturing me closer. I stayed where I was. "The nurse said you wanted to see me." He tried to speak again, frustration evident as the words wouldn't form properly. His hand shook as he pointed to the bedside table where a notepad and pen lay waiting. I watched him struggle to write, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. After several attempts, he managed to scrawl something legible: "Need to tell you truth." "What truth?" His hand moved again, slower this time. The words appeared in shaky letters: "Ashley, not mine." The room tilted slightly. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "What are you talking about?" "More writing, painful in its difficulty, your mother affair. Found out when Ashley was 2. My mind raced, trying to process what he was telling me. All those years of favoritism, of being treated like I was less than, suddenly took on a different shape. "So you punished me?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "Because Mom cheated, you decided to make my entire childhood miserable?" He wrote again, "Couldn't leave. Reputation. Business connections." Of course, I laughed bitterly. Heaven forbid Lawrence Winters look like anything less than perfect. "Kept you as spare heir," he wrote, and those 4 words crystallized everything. In case Ashley failed. I'd been an insurance policy. A backup plan. The daughter they kept around just in case their favorite didn't pan out, the one they could fall back on if Ashley didn't fulfill whatever destiny they'd imagined for her. "Does Ashley know?" I asked. He shook his head weakly. "Does Mom know you're telling me this?" Another headshake, this one accompanied by what might have been a smile on the functional side of his face. I should have felt vindicated. This man who'd made me feel worthless for decades was lying helpless before me, finally admitting the truth. But all I felt was tired. Part of me wanted to rage at him, to list every single time he'd hurt me, every dismissive comment and missed milestone and moment when he'd chosen Ashley over me. The 7th grade science fair where my project won first place, but he'd been too busy praising Ashley's participation ribbon. My high school valedictory speech that he'd left early from because Ashley had a volleyball game. My college graduation that he'd spent on his phone dealing with business calls. But standing there in that sterile hospital room, watching him struggle to breathe around the oxygen tubes, I realized that my anger would give him something he didn't deserve: my emotional energy. He'd taken enough from me already. Did you ever love me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Even a little bit? His hand shook as he tried to write, taking several attempts before managing. Tried to. Couldn't separate you from her betrayal. So you punished an innocent child for your wife's infidelity. And when Ashley turned out to be the product of that affair, instead of leaving with your actual daughter, you stayed and made sure I knew I was worthless. I watched him struggle to respond, then held up my hand. Don't. I don't need more excuses disguised as explanations. He kept writing anyway, thought if I was hard on you, you'd be strong enough to survive anything. That's not how parenting works. You don't abuse someone into strength. I moved closer to the bed, looking down at the man who'd loomed so large in my childhood and now seemed so small. You want to know something? I did become strong. But not because of you. Despite you. His eyes filled with tears, the moisture trailing down only one side of his face due to the paralysis. I built a successful career. I married someone who actually values me. I'm about to start a family with a man who would never dream of treating our children the way you treated me. I straightened up. And I did all of that after you told me I didn't deserve to carry the family name. Turns out, I didn't need your name or your approval or anything else from you. Please, he wrote, the letters barely legible. Forgive. Forgiveness is for people who've earned it through changed behavior and genuine remorse. You're only sorry now because you're dying and want to feel better about yourself. I headed for the door again. You don't get to steal my peace of mind on your way out. He tried to call out, but the stroke had stolen his voice. I heard him making garbled sounds as I walked away, desperate noises that might have broken my heart if he'd shown me even a fraction of compassion during the years when it mattered. You're making a mistake, Mom said when I emerged. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. He's dying, Naomi. I know. And he'll die the same way he lived, refusing to take real accountability for his choices. I looked at Ashley, who was watching this exchange with wide eyes. Did you know? About any of this? She shook her head mutely. Well, now you do. You were the golden child because you were the product of Mom's affair, and I was kept around as a backup plan in case you failed. I turned to my mother. How long were you planning to keep that secret? Mom's face went pale, then flushed red. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? Dad already did that, I laughed without humor. All these years, I thought something was wrong with me. Turns out, something was wrong with both of you. You don't understand the complexities. I understand that you had an affair, got pregnant, and instead of being honest, you let your husband torture your actual daughter for decades because he couldn't handle his own emotions like an adult. I gathered my purse from the waiting room chair. I understand that you're both cowards who prioritized appearances over being decent human beings. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back, Mom hissed. I wasn't planning to. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw nothing worth salvaging. Enjoy your vigil. I'm done here. Julian was waiting by the elevator, having given me space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. He took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. Let's go home, he murmured. Home. Our townhouse with its warm kitchen and comfortable furniture and walls covered in photos of people who actually loved us. Home to the nursery we'd just finished painting, with 2 cribs and matching mobiles and more stuffed animals than 2 babies could possibly need. Home to a life we'd built that had nothing to do with the people in that waiting room. Yeah, I agreed, leaning into him. Let's go home. You're telling me this now because you think it excuses everything? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Because you think I'll understand and forgive you? Wanted you to know, he wrote. Why? I already knew why. You chose cruelty over courage every single day of my life. I pushed off the wall, heading for the door. Finding out the specific reason doesn't change what you did. His hand moved frantically across the paper. Sorry. I stopped with my hand on the door handle. You had 28 years to be sorry. You chose to wait until you were dying to tell me the truth, and even then, only because you couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I looked back at him, at the tears rolling down one side of his face. That's not an apology. That's just you trying to feel better about yourself before the end. I walked out, past my mother and sister who watched with confusion. Julian was in the waiting room, coffee in hand, ready to support whatever decision I made. "Take me home," I said. The drive back was silent until we were almost at our townhouse. Then Julian spoke quietly. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I will be." Ashley called the next day. I let it go to voicemail. She called again an hour later, then sent a text. "Dad told us what happened. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. Mom tried next, her voicemail rambling and defensive. She didn't apologize for the affair or the decades of favoritism. Instead, she blamed me for abandoning Dad in his time of need, for making everything about myself when he was dying. I saved that voicemail. Not as a reminder of pain, but as evidence of exactly who these people were. Dad died 3 days later. I found out from the obituary in the Washington Post. Survived by his devoted wife Claudette, beloved daughter Ashley, and son-in-law Marcus Reynolds, it read. My name appeared nowhere. Julian found me reading it at the kitchen table. "They really did that? Did you expect anything different?" He wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Do you want to go? To the funeral?" I thought about it, really considered whether there was any part of me that needed that closure. But going would be a performance for people who'd never cared about me, pretending to grieve a man who'd seen me as nothing more than a spare part. No, I decided. I mourned the father I deserved years ago. This man was just a stranger who happened to share my DNA. Ashley showed up at my door 2 weeks later, her pregnant belly prominent under her designer maternity dress. I almost didn't open it, but Julian gave me a look that said ignoring her would bother me more than facing her. "What do you want?" I asked through the screen door. "Can I come in? Please." I stepped aside, letting her enter but not offering her a seat. We stood in the foyer, the distance between us feeling like miles instead of feet. "Mom told me everything," she said finally. "About the affair. About Dad's reasoning. Congratulations on finding out you're not who you thought you were." She flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out like a whip. "You want to talk about fair? You got their love, their support, their money, every advantage imaginable while they treated me like I was defective. And you just let it happen. I was a kid. You were 2 years younger, not helpless. You knew what was happening. You saw how they treated me versus how they treated you. I crossed my arms. And you enjoyed it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't know why. I thought you'd done something to upset them. That if I was just good enough, perfect enough, they'd treat you better too. That's a convenient lie you told yourself so you could sleep at night. "I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Naomi. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. Especially at your engagement announcement." The apology landed differently than Dad's had. Ashley was younger, still growing, still learning. But that didn't erase the years of complicity, the silent acceptance of benefits she knew I deserved just as much. "Okay," I said simply. She looked surprised. "Okay? I hear your apology. I accept that you're sorry. That doesn't mean I forgive you, and it definitely doesn't mean we're going to have some sisterly relationship now." I opened the front door. "But I hope you're a better mother than ours was. Your child deserves that. Could we maybe try to build something?" I considered her question carefully. Part of me wanted to slam the door to maintain the boundaries that had kept me safe for years. But another part, the part that had healed and grown stronger, recognized that holding on to anger would only hurt me. "Maybe," I said finally. "But on my terms, my timeline. No pressure, no expectations, no trying to force some perfect family narrative. If we rebuild anything, it'll be authentic or nothing at all." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "That's fair." After she left, Julian found me standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Complicated." I turned to face him. They kept me alive because I was useful. A backup plan in case their real daughter didn't work out. And now that I know that, I can't unknow it. But you're here anyway. You survived them. I did more than survive. I smiled slightly. I built something they couldn't touch. A career they can't diminish, relationships they can't poison, a life that has nothing to do with them. The following months brought small changes. Ashley reached out occasionally, never pushy but consistent. I responded when I felt like it, maintained boundaries when I didn't. She gave birth to a daughter and named her something that had nothing to do with family legacy. Mom tried once to reconcile, showing up at my office with a bouquet of flowers and a speech about moving forward. I listened politely, then explained that forgiveness required accountability, and she'd shown none. She left angry, and I never heard from her again. The trust fund Dad had set up for Ashley but not for me became public during estate settlement. Turns out, he'd written her in for millions while leaving me exactly $1 and a note that said, "You made your choice." I laughed when the executor read it aloud. Good. I wouldn't have taken his guilt money anyway. The boys were 3 when Mom died, too young to understand or care about a grandmother they'd never met. Julian and I took them to the zoo that day instead of the funeral, watching them squeal with delight at the elephants. They'd never feel the absence because they were surrounded by people who actually loved them. Ashley's daughter and my sons played together occasionally, supervised visits that started carefully and grew more comfortable. We weren't close, my sister and I, but we were cordial. Civil. Building something new from the ruins of what we'd never really had. One afternoon, while watching the kids play in our backyard, Ashley sat beside me on the porch steps. "Do you think about them?" she asked quietly. "Mom and Dad?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Usually when I'm doing something they would have hated or criticized. It makes those moments sweeter." "That's kind of sad." "Maybe. But it's honest." I watch my sons chase Ashley's daughter around the swing set. They try to make me believe I was worth less because I wasn't part of their plan. But the joke's on them, because their plan fell apart anyway, and I thrived without them. "Mom asks about you," Ashley said. She won't admit she was wrong, but she asks. Let her wonder. She had decades to be a mother and chose not to be. I'm not interested in giving her a redemption arc she hasn't earned. We sat in comfortable silence after that, 2 women who'd been shaped by the same dysfunction but had chosen different paths forward. Ashley was still working through her own healing, still processing the revelation that her entire identity had been built on lies. I'd had years of distance to gain perspective. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, I pulled out an old photo album I kept hidden in the back of a closet. Pictures of my childhood, carefully curated to show the happy family we'd pretended to be. Me standing slightly apart in every shot, my smile never quite reaching my eyes while Ashley beamed in the center. I'd kept these photos as evidence, proof that I wasn't imagining the differential treatment. But looking at them now, I saw something different. I saw a little girl who'd survived despite everything stacked against her. Who'd built herself into someone remarkable without the foundation most people took for granted. I took the album to the fireplace and fed the pages in one by one, watching decades of false memories turn to ash. Julian came down the stairs in his pajamas, took one look at what I was doing, and sat beside me without comment. "Getting rid of the evidence?" he asked eventually. "Don't need it anymore. I know what happened. I know who I am." The last photo curled and blackened in the flames. Keeping these was like keeping wounds open. "I'm done bleeding." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you." For burning pictures? For surviving them? For building this life? For choosing yourself when nobody else would? Years continued to pass. My career flourished. The boys grew. Ashley and I maintained our careful relationship, never close but no longer enemies. The twins asked about my parents sometimes, why they didn't have grandparents on my side. I told them the truth in age-appropriate ways. Sometimes families aren't what they should be, and it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share blood. "But we're your family," my son Oliver said once, crawling into my lap. "Right?" "The best family I could have asked for," I assured him, holding him close. His brother Andrew joined us, and Julian wrapped his arms around all 3 of us. This was what family was supposed to be: chosen, earned, built on genuine love rather than obligation or manipulation. Standing in that kitchen on New Year's Eve all those years ago, listening to my parents tell me I didn't deserve to carry their name, I couldn't have imagined this future. I'd felt destroyed, rejected, worth less than nothing. But their rejection had been the greatest gift they could have given me because it forced me to stop seeking their approval and start building my own life. I'd been kept alive as a backup plan, an insurance policy they could cash in if their preferred daughter failed. But policies only have value if you're willing to claim them, and I'd walked away from that transaction completely. They tried to define my worth based on their twisted logic and pride. Instead, I defined it myself, on my own terms, surrounded by people who saw me clearly and loved what they saw. Sometimes late at night, I wondered what Dad thought in those final moments before the stroke took his speech. Did he regret the years of cruelty? Did he wish he'd been brave enough to leave an unhappy marriage instead of punishing an innocent child for his wife's betrayal? Or did he die still believing he'd been justified, that maintaining appearances mattered more than his daughter's well-being? I'd never know, and increasingly, I found I didn't care. The only revenge I needed was living well. Loving deeply. Raising children who would never doubt their worth. Building a life so full and genuine that their absence in it meant nothing. My name might not have been in Dad's obituary, but it was on my business cards, on my son's birth certificates, on the mortgage to our dream house. I carried my name with pride, not because it connected me to the Winters legacy, but because I'd made it mean something entirely separate from them. Julian found me one evening on our 10th wedding anniversary, staring at our wedding photo on the mantel. His family filled the frame, but where my parents should have stood was just empty space. "Still bothers you sometimes?" he asked gently. "No," I said honestly. "I was just thinking about how perfect that picture is exactly as it is. Adding them would have ruined it." He pulled me close, and I let myself sink into the embrace of someone who'd never made me earn his love, who'd chosen me fully and completely from the start. My parents gave me life but refused to let me live. They kept me as a spare part, a contingency plan they hoped never to need. But in rejecting their conditional love, I'd found something infinitely more valuable, the freedom to become exactly who I was meant to be. And in the end, that was the best revenge imaginable.